how do I avoid mistakes when I play the piano? If you're finding that you're constantly making mistakes when you play, and by mistakes, I'm talking in the context of you're slipping, you're playing wrong notes, even though you're not going for those notes. You're playing wrong chords, even though you're not going for those wrong chords. Mistakes can become chronic. If you practice something enough, eventually it becomes the norm. That includes mistakes. The body is an amazing tool, right? The brain is an amazing tool. It memorizes everything we do, whether or not we want it to. If we do that task enough, our body will start to memorize it. It doesn't differentiate whether or not it's mistakes or not. What that means is when you're practicing, it's important to avoid mistakes in your practice. The way we avoid mistakes is to practice slowly. Where you'll see this rear its head most frequently is when you're doing technique activity. So if you're practicing your scales and you're like, right? If you're practicing your scales and you're glitching and you're missing fingerings and you're playing two notes instead of one, or you're constantly ending up on the wrong fingering, if you're doing that and you're doing that consistently at a certain speed that you cannot maintain, and you practice that way for weeks and months, you're actually reinforcing mistakes in your own playing that you're then going to have to spend weeks and months later to undo. So that's why, one, I always tell folks, practice slowly. You want to practice it to a pace where your body feels like it's in slow motion, which means you have more than enough time to think about what comes next. The second thing is you want to make sure you're practicing with a metronome. If you don't want to use the old school tick-tock metronome, use a drum beat. A drum beat that comes on a lot of keyboards or apps you can download. A drum beat is just a fancy metronome, but it's still a metronome. You have to get comfortable practicing to a beat, to a click. That way you help to monitor your speed, but it also forces you to stay in time and forces you to know if you're practicing too quickly or if you need to practice even faster, right? So when you're practicing stuff like scale, it needs to be steady, metronomical, and you notice there's no mistakes. I'm not playing any incorrect fingering. My teacher used to say, if you cannot play something 5 times in a row without making mistakes, that means you don't know it that well yet. You need to be able to practice or play something 5 times in a row. So if you're practicing your scales, arpeggios, block chords, or broken chord at a certain tempo, and you cannot play it 5 times back to back at that particular tempo mark without making a mistake, that means you don't know it well enough yet, and you probably should back off the tempo. Slow it down to a pace where you can play it at least 5 times in a row without mistake. Then you up it a little, and you don't move from that level until you can play it 5 times in a row without mistakes. And that's how you gradually can increase speed and technique in all of these different areas without incorporating mistakes. The same thing goes for songs. Practice it slower, practice it to a metronome, and you do not increase that metronome mark until you can play whatever exercise it is 5 times in a row without mistakes. And if you practice that way, your body will retain the correct way or the correct format as to whatever the task is. And that's how you minimize mistakes. Now, does that mean you're going to become this perfect human being that never slips up? No, right? Because that's not music. Part of being a musician is taking liberty and being free and playing in the moment and trying new things on the spot. Those things, when you do that, you may occasionally make mistakes. That's okay. What you don't want is when you sit down to practice, you're trying to be the in the moment freestyle, because that's when the mistakes now become chronic. So when you sit down to practice, you need to have a goal as to what you're trying to accomplish. What am I going to practice right now? And then you be deliberate about exactly what you want to work on so that you can be precise to avoid mistakes. So that's really how you tackle number 2. Question number 2, how do I avoid mistakes in my playing? You have to practice deliberately and slowly. using the same fingerings, the same chord voicing, whatever you're doing. Be as consistent as possible so your body can memorize what's going on. And then after that, then you can be free with it with whatever you want.